Something very strange is happening right now in the global economy, and most people have no idea how exposed they are to it.
Big tech now pouring more capital than ever into AI, expected to spend a combined $600 billion.
This month, the biggest technology companies on the planet committed to spending a combined $660 billion on AI. That is more than the entire GDP of Sweden in a single year on a technology that has not yet proven it can generate anywhere near enough revenue to justify that kind of bet. Now, I'm not here to tell you this is a bubble, but whether or not you think it is, the question of what happens if things go wrong affects you directly, even if you have never bought a share of Nvidia in your life. What I want to do today is run a kind of war game. 5 scenarios, ranging from mild to catastrophic, for what happens if the AI bet does not pay off. The last 2 are involving a chain reaction that very few people are tracking. If you're new here, I'm Walter Pasquarelli. I spent the better part of a decade advising governments and businesses on AI strategy and policy. If you enjoy this type of content, consider subscribing. The conversations of the downsides of this moment is dangerously misunderstood. So let's fix that. First, we need to understand when a bubble becomes dangerous. When I first started studying economic bubbles, I did almost everything wrong, but this turning point changed everything. Not all bubbles are the same. Some pop and the world barely notices. Others pop and entire economies lose a decade of growth. Here's how to understand how painful an economic bubble will be. The Economist studied 10 historical bubbles and identified 4 factors that determine how much damage a crash actually causes. First, the spark. Was it driven by a genuine excitement or inflated by politicians and cheap credit? Second is the scale of investment. How much money did go in and how fast? Third, durability. Is the stuff that got built still useful or is it junk? And fourth, who holds the losses? Wealthy speculators, or the banking system, or ordinary households? Keep these 4 factors in your head. I'm going to score the current AI moment against each of these factors at the end. But first, the scenarios. I've arranged these from the mildest to the severest, but pay close attention of how each one feeds into the next. Because the thing about financial crises is that they don't stay in their lane. The best outcome for an AI bubble, according to the internet, looks like this. The hype cools, spending slows, some startups fold, the Magnificent 7 lose 15 to 20% of their market value. And these companies are not fragile. Microsoft, Amazon, and Google are sitting on enormous cash reserves. They can absorb the hit, and the average person does not feel much. This is the scenario most tech executives will tell you is the most likely to happen, but it requires something very specific to go right. And that's where scenario 2 happens. While others are still investing in AI, I'm watching this one company that could bring everything down. For scenario 1 to hold, the biggest players need to stay standing. But what if one of them stumbles? OpenAI has raised $35 billion, it signed a $300 billion deal with Oracle, and it is forecast to lose around $10 billion this year. If it stumbles badly, the chain reaction would be immediate. Oracle's commitment evaporates, chip makers lose a critical customer, and the narrative flips from unstoppable momentum to existential doubt. Even here, the financial system probably survives, but the psychological damage could trigger something much larger. And that brings us to the scenario that most people have completely missed. I shouldn't really be telling you this, but there's one number that changes everything about how you will see AI investments. Remember when I said at the beginning that this affects you personally, even if you have never bought a share of Nvidia? American households currently hold roughly $42 trillion in stocks. That is 21% of total household wealth, higher than it has ever been. The top 20 companies in the S&P 500 account for 52% of the index. During the dot-com peak, that was 39%. And a huge share of those top 20 are directly tied to AI. The former chief economist of the IMF estimated that a dot-com scale crash today would wipe out $20 trillion in household wealth. At that scale, hundreds of billions of consumer spending simply disappears. People start buying, small businesses start laying people off, and the AI crash becomes a real economy recession. Your retirement fund holds these stocks. Your pension does, but it's still not the scariest scenario, because so far everything that I've described involves stocks. Scenario 4 involves something much harder to unwind. You'll never understand the real risk of AI investment if you don't look at what is being built in the physical world. The AI build-out is not just software. It is concrete and steel and gas turbines. Meta's data center in Louisiana will consume twice as much power as the city of New Orleans. These facilities are being built on 3 assumptions: that models keep getting better, that demand keeps growing, and that the chips inside them stay useful. There are serious questions about all 3. Michael Burry, who predicted the 2008 housing crash, recently bet over $1 billion against AI stocks. His thesis: Nvidia releases new chips every year, but if the chips in today's data centers become obsolete within 3 years, the value of those facilities collapses. The Economist estimated that would cut the combined value of the 5 biggest tech companies by $780 billion. And here's the part that keeps me up at night. Power companies, banks, private equity firms, insurance companies, and pension funds are all financing this build-out. If the data centers lose value, those contracts and loans go bad. And now you have a problem that is no longer a stock market event, it is a financial system event. If you want to learn more about the data center landscape, I've made a whole other video, you can find it in the description box below. Which brings us to the last scenario. If you want to understand the biggest risk in the global economy right now, you need to hear this. And I want to be clear, this is not the most likely outcome, but its consequences would be so severe that even a small probability demands attention. In this scenario, multiple things break at once. Scaling would stop delivering improvements, and one of the co-founders of OpenAI recently said that he does not believe that making models 100 times larger will be transformative. Meanwhile, corporate adoption would stall. The US Census Bureau did actually report that the share of larger companies using AI actually fell recently from 14% to 12%. But to be clear, this is first of all just in the US, and there's secondly a bit of disagreement of whether the number has actually been grown or whether it has been shrinking as they've been claiming. If the technology disappoints and adoption stalls simultaneously, stocks crater, consumer wealth evaporates, and everyone who financed the build-out takes massive losses. Now, the Trump administration's AI czar has publicly declared that there will be no bailout for any AI companies, even though from some other sources of mine in private they tell a different story. But in 2008, bailouts prevented a meltdown. Without them, we would be in uncharted territory. Now, if you've made it this far, you might be feeling pretty grim, but I promise you that by the end of this video, I will take you somewhere unexpected. And I meant it, because the most surprising thing about the history of bubbles is not about the wreckage that they leave behind, but it's really about the opportunities and the things that can grow out of it. Have you ever wondered why some of the best things were built on top of disasters? Think about it, the dot-com crash wiped out trillions, but it left behind fiber optic cables, server farms, and a generation of engineers who understood the internet. Google, Amazon, Netflix, none of them existed during the bubble. They were built on its ruins. 200 years of history tells the same story. The companies that truly transform a technology are almost never the ones that rode the bubble. They come after, using the cheap wreckage the bubble left behind. A crash might give society the breathing room to redirect the technology towards augmenting humans rather than replacing them. What if an AI crash actually leads to something better? So let me bring this back to you based on the 4 factors we identified earlier: the spark, the spending, the durability, and who holds the losses. The spark was technological with the launch of ChatGPT, which was good, but politicians are jumping on the hype wagon and spending is increasing pretty fast. But really the uncomfortable point is the durability. Railways last a century. AI chips might last 3 years. And the losses, if they come, will land on pension funds, insurance companies, and the retirement savings of tens of millions of ordinary people who never placed this bet themselves. That is what makes this moment different from any previous tech bubbles. The exposure is wider than it has ever been. Now, none of this is inevitable. AI is already today delivering major tangible benefits, so the revenue might catch up eventually. And I genuinely hope that happens. But the most dangerous moment in any boom is not when people get scared, but when they stop asking questions. So we made a separate video analyzing the evidence for and against the bubble, which you can watch just right here. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. Let me know in the comment section below, do you think we're in a bubble or do you think we're still riding the hype wave? I'd love to know what you think. Till next time.